Good.
I'm
Perfect.
not a good judge.
That's perfect. Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. I was just on her show. Her name's Courtenay Turner. First name is spelled Courtenay, Turner, Turner, and you'll see her. If you're watching this on X, Rockfin, or Rumble, you will see this video that she was involved in. When we were talking the pre-show, I was not aware her research was involved in this, and we can talk about this. It's called Like a Phoenix, The Death and Rebirth of America. It's featured on the Canadian Patriot website and YouTube channel, run by Matthew Arrett and Cynthia Chung, who I just talked to Matthew Arrett recently, too, about his work with Peter Thiel and Musk. But when we talked last, me and Courtenay, something came up. Like, it's been on my radar, the Weinstein brothers and Eric and Brett. So Eric came out with, like, there was a picture, an article that he had written that was referenced by Johnny Vedmore, which basically is this kind of economic migration, which we're seeing in the world right now, displacing old peoples and nation states.
It's called Migration for the Benefit of All.
Right, supposedly. At least that's the title. So it's kind of, and I've heard, and I listened to his brother, Brett, who's on Rogan often, and some of this hit me wrong. Like some of the way he talks and his ideas. I know that he's a Darwinist, and also he talks in vague terms, like Goliath is out there, and it's kind of almost not it's almost kind of intellectually inept for somebody who's supposedly a doctor. I think he's a doctor or something.
Evolutionary biologist,
Thank
PhD,
you. Professor, yeah. Well, clearly you know more than me, so I'm glad to have you on the show as a guest. Thank you so much. And we're going to go into kind of his thinking, this Like a Phoenix video that you were involved in researching, and this concept of Game B, which I don't know much about. I've seen some of these kind of ideas, and I've listened to two of your shows on the subject on your podcast, Courtenay Turner, which I will put a reference to your podcast in the show notes. But people can listen to them too. But I'm trying to pick it up. But there's a lot there, and it kind of overlaps with this new kind of technocracy and these what I call the tech overlords, and this kind of new utopia. But she can talk more about that. So Courtenay Turner, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. So Brett was kind of how I found this Game B. I had done a series of videos. One of them I did with Cynthia. I had Johnny Vedmore on. I had, been following his work on Eric Weinstein. And I had seen this video that Brett had done for the Rescue the Republic. And it really struck me. It was a little odd. He spent the last 5 minutes of the video. And now I will just preface by saying I've never met Eric, but I've actually met Brett in person. He is a very nice person. He strikes me as a very intelligent. I think they both are. But, some of the ideas were a little bit peculiar to me, particularly in this Rescue the Republic video that he did. Now, when I met him, I was part of kind of this group that was trying to come up with solutions. We were trying to combat the WHO. This was at the time of the WHO pandemic, treaty, which became Accords because they didn't want to actually have to have it ratified, right? He was a part of this group. And then the follow-up to that was this Rescue the Republic, which I did not go to. But at the Rescue the Republic, he spent the last 5 minutes. So as you have mentioned, I've been following Eric Weinstein as well, which Johnny Vedmore did the work on. He did some really great work on that. His migration for the great, he calls it the Great Replacement, but it's migration for the replacement of all, for the benefit of all. He was actually working for the UN between the years of 2000 to 2002. And the
not
UN,
mentioning that publicly either.
No, he doesn't seem to address that. But the UN did take his documents, and they have since expounded on that. That is kind of where this, migration theory has come from. This is what we're seeing really all through Europe. I mean, certainly the UK, and now we're really seeing it here in the United States, unfortunately. So I think in part, at least we have him to thank for that. Brett was a very, very nice person, but I'm looking at this video, and in the last 5 minutes, and it wasn't a quick throwaway, he actually spent 5 minutes defending this statement that he made, where he says that it's, he said, that he goes through the the very famous Ben Franklin, question, is this a monarch or a republic? And of course, Ben Franklin famously replied, a republic, if you can keep it. And he said, it's a republic if we can phoenix it. And this just struck me it was like something stabbed me, that kind of a response. Wow, that is a really strange comment. Now, in this speech, he actually talks about, it's supposed to be about the Republic, right? It's rescue the Republic. He mentions America very, if at all, very little. He talks a lot about the West, this, overarching West. Now, I'm a big proponent of Western civilization. I think it's done a lot of good for humanity. I'm obviously a byproduct of that, and I'm grateful to be an American. That doesn't mean that there aren't wonderful people and great things that have come from other parts of the world, obviously from the East. However, I'm an American, and if you're talking about, saving the Republic, then I would think you would address the Republic, and you would certainly address the founding of this nation. And so he talks about how it's a republic, we can phoenix it. Now, the first time I had heard of Phoenix, certainly there's Operation Phoenix, which is very famous. This is, the CIA basically expansion of MK Ultra. Cynthia did phenomenal work on that. But I was on your show previously talking about Tavistock. That was a bit of my awakening moment. That was a lot of my research focus for quite some time. And I had this great book. I don't have it in front of me, but it's by Henry Vicks, and he was a Tavistock psychologist. And so I find a lot of time people read books that are the critique of the things they don't like. I typically actually like to read from the either sympathizers or even better, the insiders who are, sympathizers, because I think in some ways they're not looking to critique, and they actually reveal much more because they don't think that they need to hide anything because they're so proud of it. It's the best example of this would be Carroll Quigley, right? Tragedy and Hope. He was an archivist for the CFR, and he writes this tell-all tome that's almost 1,400 pages. And, he's so proud of what they're doing. And of course, they say to him, I'm paraphrasing, we're secret for a reason. He says, well, no, this is phenomenal. The world should know about it. And here you go. So I think that's probably the great example of that, but there are many. And this was Henry Vicks' book. It was the 50 Years of Tavistock. And so he really outlines this whole trajectory from the Tavistock Clinic through to the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, or current times. And he talks about all the ancillary organizations, about a lot of the trusts that were involved, which is very interesting, that they were working through so many trusts, which is a little suspicious to me. Why were they operating through trust? But and through this whole book, he's constantly talking about how they were constantly trying to source money. And there's one section where he talks about, it's on their website too, I can't remember, but it's some royalty who they appealed to, who made a big donation. And they talk about how they had to court them. They did these big fancy dinners, and that it wasn't just such a victory that they got them to donate, but it was also such a prestige. It really elevated them in the eyes of the field. And so in this book, though, they talk about, it's actually the reason I bought this book. It's not an easy book to find, but the reason I bought it was because when I was doing my research on Tavistock, I found they talked a lot about what they call wasabis. Yeah. Or I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's for War Office Selection Boards. And this really fascinated me because I actually think there's a document, I reference this all the time. You can pull it off of the CIA.gov site, but it's From Mice to Rascals. And they talk about how they recruit basically agents. They don't say change agents, but that's essentially what they're talking about. But they talk about assets agents for, military intelligence and that sort of thing. And it really looked to me like their process came out of these War Office Selection Boards, because I had studied those and I was just seeing a lot of similarities and a lot of cross references. And it does look like the timeline completely pans out. And I think a lot of the tests that led to that Mice to Rascals document did come from these War Office Selection Board testing protocols that they developed. And MICE, of course, stands for money, ideology, coercion, and ego. And then they decided rascals was a better term. And I always blank on what rascals is, but I think it's a reciprocity, authority, and then S is scarcity. C is also coercion, compliance. The A, I don't remember. Then the L is liking. And the last one, the last S, I think was something like social proof, but it's very similar. But they had changed the name. And you can find that document. I could probably pull it up to find the exact reference if you want. But so I had been looking into these War Office selection boards. And when I was studying that, I found that there was an Operation Phoenix at Tavistock. And this led me to, I was looking up, like on Wikipedia, I found a little bit, but of course, what really comes up is the CIA. But then, of course, I started looking up, the War Office selection boards and the connection. And I found on their website, they're very transparent. They have a whole section on the Operation Phoenix, restructuring of Tavistock, and that led to this this World War II restructuring, where it was no longer just the Tavistock Clinic, where they were doing these shell shock therapy research on the individual soldiers under the auspices that the soldiers had suffered this post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course, we want to help the soldiers. But now the entire population was traumatized by World War II. And so, of course, now we are all patients of Tavistock, and they're going to save us all through their mass experiments. And so the operation, what's it called? The Operation Phoenix, was a kind of a, that was what led to that. So that became a big area of interest to me. And that's how I found this book. And it has a whole section, I think it's like 30 pages on Operation Phoenix in it. But so, of course, if you're not familiar with the symbol of the Phoenix, and I would encourage people to watch Cynthia's film. She did a really fantastic job on it. She tied together a lot of other ends that I was not really looking at, like the Smithsonian, which she's done a book on, and great research there. And I was definitely not looking at that. But but the Phoenix symbol is a Rosicrucian symbol. Now, I don't think that everybody who uses this term is aware of that. My grandfather actually named his company Phoenix. A lot of people just think of it as like rising up from the ashes. It's a symbol of, resilience. But for the Rosicrucians, it was this idea of, the unknown God, and it's the idea of rebirth. And you have this there you have to burn it, that as the phrase goes from the CIA Operation Phoenix, right? In Vietnam, we have to burn the village to save the village. And so this is kind of really just the Great Reset, right? We have
it's an occult symbol. It's in Manly P. Hall's. It's features in the Secret Teachings of All Ages. There's a huge picture of the Phoenix. He explains it in great detail. So it overlaps with a lot of different occult traditions. Yeah. And in Harry Potter, so like when it's included in Harry Potter, it's a part of the occult tradition in a broader sense. Yeah.
Very much so. So, and it is really the Great Reset, right? It's you have to tear it down to build back better. That is what they're referencing. So when Brett Weinstein says it's a republic if we can phoenix it, that doesn't sound like saving the republic. That sounds like we've got to burn it down so that we can rebuild it. And that was just very concerning to me. And he did spend a good 5 minutes. That's the speech on this. And so I had started doing a little more digging on him.
Just to interrupt, this speech took place at the Rescue the Republic. It was a big event, right? It was on the mall in DC, right? Or something like that. So it was like attended. So this was kind of a nexus event, about this. So now he's talking about, and there's always this conflict about maintaining the republic or starting anew or getting a new constitution. So this is very dicey kind of stuff he's talking about, in my opinion.
Well, I agree. And especially, you're looking at like this whole convention of states conversation that's going on, and it's being very much championed on the quote unquote right. But when you look into the funding of that, like the Koch money is all over it. Mercer Family Foundation is definitely involved. We actually have that on the tax receipts. And then like donor trust, which is typically associated with Koch brothers. I know there's only one of them now. One has passed since, but it there. And then you, even as of very, very recently, you had Pete Hegseth championing this convention of states. And he's, of course, a member of the, what is it, the Concerned Veterans group. And they have a lot of Koch funding as well. So it just looks like, and of course, that's what is the Koch is, a Koch brothers, the Koch family has been very heavily involved in things like the Atlas Network, right? The consortium that AFP is a part of. That's Americans for Prosperity. I call them Americans for Propaganda. The ones who are championing against school choice right now, and they've dumped tons of money into my state personally against school choice. But it's also part of the larger, which Koch has also been very heavily invested in funding, the Mont Pelerin Society, which, you know, is an outgrowth of the Walter Lippmann Colloquium. And of course, people think of this as being very libertarian. This gets to right at the heart of actually what we're going to talk about with Game B, because people typically, I think they've created this great dialectic with the left and the right, and you know they really work through both sides, and you know it is to create the Alf-Haven negation. But I think right now they're kind of realizing a lot of people are not on board with either, and they're really trying to appeal to the libertarian group. But when you look at the history of things like the Mont Pelerin Society, which, you know, think tanks like the Heritage Foundation are a part of and are championing, again, this convention of states. The Heritage Foundation is notoriously supposed to be a conservative, quote unquote, think tank, and they've championed all sorts of things that are anything but conservative. So that's but so I started looking into Brett a bit, and I stumbled on this Game B stuff, and I, you know, was kind of like, what is this all about? And I started going down this rabbit hole of Game B, and it turns out Brett was involved like from the very inception. So it started out around 2011, and the granddaddy of Game B would be Jim Rutt. Jim Rutt is a systems theorist, complexity theorist. He was the chairman of the Santa Fe Institute, which specializes in those sciences, as they call it, the sciences. We had talked before we got on, and you said kind of reminds you a little of like an Esalen of the Midwest. I would agree with that very much. It's also very adjacent to things like cybernetics. And interestingly enough, now that the technology is catching up, the Association for Cybernetics Research has resurged, and they've now started what they call the new Macy conferences.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow. I've done a lot of stuff on the Macy stuff with Hans Uter. Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
The new Macy, and they're ramping up, and I think it's because the technology is catching up to what they really want to accomplish. You know, that's my assessment. You know, I can't corroborate that, but looking at what they're doing and the timeline and some of these emerging technologies, as they call it, it certainly seems that way. So I don't think it's coincidental. They have a whole YouTube page, by the way, if you want to start, you know, looking at them. That's what they're doing. But yeah, so the Santa Fe Institute, he's also very heavily invested in a lot of technology. One of the most prominent or well-known might be Network Solutions, which is, you know, they do a lot of like domain names, that sort of thing. So that's Jim Rutt, and he's on the screen right now, as you can see, how to transition to Game B Society. So when he started this in 2011, it was at the Stanton meetings, is what he called them. And Brett Weinstein was involved in these original Stanton meetings in 2011. And the Stanton meetings, the focus of them was really, and he talks a lot about it actually in this video, not the Stanton meetings, but he talks about the focus was really political. He was really trying to create a new political party, and he calls it the Emancipation Party. Now, when you study Game B, the term transpolitical comes up a lot. And I've noticed there's a lot of these movements, and they have some overlap, and some are just, you know, also cropping up. They're aligned, but not necessarily directly converging or interacting. But his was called the Emancipation Party. And there's others, like there's the United Independent, which is Christopher Life's movement. Of course, they love their oxymoronic terms. I mean, United and Independent. But yeah, I guess we get the Hegelian synthesis that way. And then there's the People's Party, which has a very long history that goes all the way to the bimetalist. But they're definitely active now. And then there's the One Nation Party, and I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones I'm aware of. So the Emancipation Party that he was trying to launch at these Stanton meetings that Brett Weinstein was very heavily involved in. He was at all of these, original meetings, were really to create a new political party, and the platform was very aligned with, I would say, like a Bernie Sanders platform. It was very socialist. There were, some of the key things, and these are key things in Game B as well, were things like the UBI, and they're still big proponents of that. Universal health care. Some of these the different types of, he calls it liquid democracy. Of course, Barbara Marx Hubbard had a synergistic democracy. It's very similar. This idea of a fluid democracy but it is a direct democracy. He of his own words, actually, in that last video you had up, says a direct democracy. So they're advocating for some of these things, and there were a lot of evolutionary biologists who are in this. They do really like the evolutionary biologists in this space, which is interesting. And you had said it sounds kind of Darwinian. So to me, it's more aligned with the evolutionary leaders. And they are absolutely evolutionists, but they say that they are not Darwinian. So the evolutionary leaders, for an example, would be Bruce Lipton. And he very explicitly says that they're not Darwinian, although to me, it's kind of like when the, neo-Marxists say they're not Marxist. Right. It really just means they cherry pick the parts of it they like and they rejected the rest. Right. And so the reason they say that they're not Darwinian is because they don't like natural selection. Because natural selection breeds too much competition. And competition is what they're trying to transcend, to use.
Right. That's one of the defining characteristics of Game A, right?
Yes.
This over competition or whatever.
Exactly. So, so Bruce Lipton talks about how, we started as these single cell organisms and we became amoeba. And the thing that makes the amoeba intelligent is its membrane. And then it says we evolve from there and we become these, by the time we get to humans, we're these complex, multicellular organisms. And he says, what makes humans so intelligent? Well, of course, it's because we have so much surface area of membrane that we collect all of our intelligence. And then he says, well, we're at a crossroads now, and we have the option to co-create and co-evolve, to choose to evolve into the superorganism of humanity. And of course, he says that the membrane for the superorganism of humanity is going to be what? The internet. So they reminds me a little bit more of that kind of theory of evolution that they subscribe to. But they do really champion a lot of what they're calling emerging technologies. But the Emancipation Party was a flop. It did not take off. Jim Rutt says he blames the millennials. He said the boomers were all on board, but you can't create a political movement with just the boomers. And he said the Gen X, he feels like he could have worked on them. They might have gotten on board, but that the millennials loved the platform. They were all on board with, a UBI and universal health care. And they have a whole platform of this emancipation reforms that you can still look at. Jim Rutt actually posted it pretty recently on Twitter. So that is still available. But so they said that they were pretty on board, but that the idea of a political party was an anathema to them because they were such anarchists. And so they kind of disbanded this, left this Emancipation Party idea behind. But it was Thor Mueller who Jim Rutt credits for telling him that they should keep Game B for branding purposes. And so they moved on to develop this concept that they call a social operating system for society. So it's a new social operating system. And yes, as you were saying, it's really, they talk about Game A, which is, rivalrous and competitive, and it's a win-lose game. And they say what we need to move into is game B, which is non-rivalrous. It's really the analogy I would use. They're now taking the new age term of moving out of the era of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And it's very much the same concept, is that now we are going to move into this collective. The term in game B is actually collective intelligence. So kind of a, take on Jung, who the mystic, the Mithrian, who claimed we had a collective unconscious. Now they're saying we have collective intelligence. And I think this is, of course, a nod to the artificial intelligence that they very much champion. And but so they did this really, in my opinion, creepy video, Initiation to Game B, which I played a part of in the presentation I did for Rising Tide Foundation. But it's really easy to find. It's on the Stoa network on YouTube. And they outline, how you go from Game A. And they say that Game A is not the original system, by the way. They do say that. And they kind of describe this original system, which looks like a Neoplatonic kind of mystery cults society.
Right. It has that kind of language. You kind of have this new age language.
Very much.
Phoenix, Aquarian age, this new utopia. So it kind of gives, kind of elicits, makes your kind of antenna stand up. Like, okay, these guys are kind of more new agers than maybe scientists or something.
Yeah, and they claim they're hard scientists, but right. When you actually hear them talk, it sounds like they contradict themselves a bit. But I'll leave that up to your interpretation. That was my interpretation very much. But then you move into this game B, and the game A, and game A is this competitive society. It's a real dig at Western civilization, of course, at capitalism. And then they say game B does not exist yet. They're laying out the vision for game B. I would argue they're laying out the utopia. And people have pushed back to me saying, well, they're pointing out some very real problems. I don't deny that there are problems with our current society and our current system. Last time I checked, it involved human beings, and we are flawed, and we're not capable of perfection. But I think that we're doing a pretty good job compared to previous times. And I think that the system we created, especially here in the United States, have afforded a lot more freedom and opportunity than some other parts of the world. And not that there's not room for improvement, but I'm not quite ready to just dispose of it in favor of some sort of utopian. And yeah, even just looking at like the artwork and the characters, it's a very intentional. I do feel like there's a lot of programming in this. There's a lot of kind of, I think, conditioning and priming to the indigenous types of societies. And Yunka Porta is one of the makers of the Game B video. He's very much involved in this movement. And he actually wrote a whole book on the indigenous people and what we can learn from them. I forgot the name of it, but
they talk a lot about tribes and stuff too. I
yes.
remember you mentioning that often in your talks, like our tribe and our thing. And it's like, whoa, this is like you're trying to go back to the beginning. I think that there was a lot of communist stuff too. The communists like to go back to anthropology. Like this is the natural order, is to share everything and do all this stuff. So it's a little suspect.
I would agree with both. So I think part of this, elevating the indigenous people is I think it's very intentional, and I think it is very manipulative, honestly. This is not to be derogatory. I think, there's wonderful things that come out of all of those various indigenous tribes and people, certainly. But when you're dispersed like that and you're isolated and you're much less, industrialized, they're easier to take over and to co-opt. And we've seen that throughout history. And I think they're hoping that people will, of their own volition, choose that option, which makes them much more susceptible to being co-opted, to being steered, and to having some sort of a revolutionary alternative offered to them. And
Good
I
point.
think
Yeah,
that that's
really
really what that's all about. I also think you mentioned some of this kind of communist, it harkens very much to communitarianism,
yes.
to communal living. Jim Rutt himself talks about kibbutzes and how that was very much a model for him, which is kind of a communal communist lifestyle. But what I really think we're going to see now, even in the Game B video, at the very end, she opens her hand and there's a coin. I hope I'm not ruining it for you. It's a 20-minute YouTube video, but for those who might not have seen it, but yeah, there's the coin. And if you look on the gamebfilm.org, I believe it is, or I don't think it's .com, I think it's .org website, they actually have like coins for Game B.
Wow.
And they have that on the site. So they're really promoting this tokenized economy, which I think is really I found very interesting because I kind of saw it as a funnel towards the network state. And I've actually looked at the network state website, and on it, not surprisingly, is companies like Prospera, Peter Thiel's Prospera, Bitcoin Cities.
Right.
And you expect that, right? And they have a long list. But at the very end, just as I suspected, Game B is still pending approval, but it is on that list.
Wow, incredible. So there's these overlaps. It makes sense. It's utopianism, techno-utopianism, but also the strange kind of like creepy element, initiation. Like you're not going to voluntarily become a member. You're going to be initiated into Plan B. That's pretty intense. Like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing with the network states too, though, right? You're going to be initiated. You're going to this is what I really think they're trying to set up. And we're seeing this. I really want to be wrong about it. And I hope I am. So, this is just what I see kind of coming down the pike. And hopefully, even if I'm right, maybe we can push back against it. That's the only reason I share that this is what I'm seeing. So what I see is there's this top-down structure of like the AI World Society where they want to put you. This is the UN Centennial's vision for 2045, which I don't think is any coincidence. When you look at 2045, you've got the AI World Society. You have Ray Kurzweil's new book where he says the singularity is nearer and it's going to appear in 2045. And then you also have Jim Rutt in his plan, A Journey to Game B. He actually outlines 2045 as the year when the like proto Game B will emerge. He calls it pre-Game B, so like the early stages will really manifest. And he says that in his A Journey to Game B. Now he says this is just a blueprint. It's not, it's really just his visions. He's just laying it out. This isn't like a guide or a prediction, but I think it's interesting. The year 2045. So of course the AI World Society is 2045 because that's the centennial of the UN, and this is based on the book that Michael Dukakis, the former governor of Massachusetts, wrote. It's called "Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment."
Wow.
And again, we have the New Age
presidential candidate, right? When did he run? I forgot when it was. Probably what?
That's
80,
right.
88 maybe. Does that sound right?
That does sound right. I don't remember exactly what year, but it was around then. That does sound right.
He ran against Bush, right? Wasn't that the famous picture of him in the tank? Okay. But he was a big time politician for his era. Yeah. Interesting.
So he wrote this Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment. So Boston Global Forum is working in partnership with the UN100.net, or you can find AIWorldSociety.net, but they're all working in conjunction with each other to create this vision of an AI world society. Sometimes they call it artificial world intelligence. I forgot what the other term is, but it's an AI world society that they're laying out. And so in that, of course, you would have this top-down structure. They talk about a social value reward system that is very similar to the social credit system, but the difference is it's meritocratic, of course. You're going to earn your tokens, and that it's not top-down is what they say. And so, but of course it is coming from the UN. It's coming from like, a centralized AI governance, which they talk about. They talk about how they're going to have all of these various nodes. And they say that Ukraine will actually be the central node of this AI World Society. They've done many symposiums on how they have to rebuild Ukraine. Here we go again with the Phoenix, right? We have to tear it down to build back better. And they say we have to rebuild it because it's been decimated by the war. And we have to give all this funding and support to Ukraine to rebuild it so it can be the central locus for all of these various smart cities, C40 cities, the 15-minute cities that are going to be linked to the Ukraine hub. And then they talk about how, we'll have all our human governments supplanted by AI governments. But then I think what's going to happen is we've already seen Trump has already rejected any central bank digital currency. And I predicted that. I knew that was going to come because there's been a lot of awareness, a lot of pushback. People, especially on the quote unquote right, are not happy with the idea of central bank digital currency. So what's going to come next? You have him championing things like Bitcoin. He's talking about making Bitcoin, the reserve coin. And I think that is going to be a funnel for the dialectical pole, which is the network state. And what people don't seem to realize is that you can be locked out of a network state. You still need a digital ID to enter. You might not have an official social credit number, but you have to meet their terms of conditions. And most of that is done through smart contracts. So that has to be programmed by somebody. What if there's just a glitch and you get locked out? And now everything is tokenized and you're in a gamified economy. It's
terrifying.
I know. That's how I see it.
They had that guy Altman who was just in front of Trump with a $500 billion investment. Stargate say that we may have to, he literally said in a recorded thing, we may have to think about the entire social contract.
He did.
That's terrifying. Who's going to do the thinking for the social contract? It's not you or me, it's them, right? So it's going
to be the effective altruist, right? Wasn't Sam Altman one of the effective altruists?
Sure, it's a great phrase. I love all these fake phrases with the new age stuff. And that was one of the things that made me sit up in my chair when I was listening to your talks, is how many other new agers you mentioned from the hierarchy of the new agers, like Barbara Marx Hubbard and some of these other people that are very much like John Brisson's done the research, Finders Associated, really creepy. So this is coming from a kind of intellectual, the heritage of Game B goes back to some of these other characters, right?
It does. So they have, a lot of these people are disciples of Barbara Marx Hubbard. A lot of them do talk about, the noosphere created. They use the term, and if you look at it, I think, is that the Game B Wiki page?
I do have that.
Oh, okay.
But this is the website. You kind of have to request to join. But
I've requested. I have not been accepted yet.
Okay. Something tells me it's not going to be likely.
Yeah, something.
I wouldn't hold your breath. But here's the wiki page. It's a very detailed wiki page, by the way.
It's very detailed. Yes. So on there, they one of the let me see if I can go back on.
Another name that popped up was Taylor Deschardins too, which
the noosphere.
Yeah, so that's another character. And I think you mentioned the changing images of man. So all this stuff is wrapped up into Game B. So it definitely is. Its foundational precepts are in this kind of, like I said, strain of thought, new age strain of thought. I guess it's a simple way of putting it.
Absolutely. So yeah, when you look at I'm not sure if I can find that one page where an introduction to Game B, I think, is where, okay, here it is. So when you go to the introduction to Game B, it says Game B is a vision. And then right under there is Stuart Brand. And his quote in 1968, this is on the opening of his Whole Earth magazine that he launched, right? And it says, "We're as gods. We might as well get good at it." And he's, of course, he's now involved in the, what is it called? The New Long Foundation. Why am I blanking on this? Stuart, the name of it.
The New Long Foundation.
It is the New Long Foundation. Okay. Yeah. And this, people like Jonathan Haidt have been doing all sorts of speeches and, dialogues, as they call it, with him on this foundation. But yes, originally it was this Whole Earth magazine. And so that was his opening quote. And then in 2015, he says, "We are gods. We better get good at it."
Right. No, that's an incredible statement. That's totally a cult too. Like,
that's a Gnostic statement. We
there
are
you
gods.
go. Yeah, yeah. That's one of the things you don't see is like Christian. I mean, other than the fake Christian, in my opinion, like Chardon, who was involved in Piltdown hoax. You don't see a lot of Christian theology in any of this conversation. So that's
no. Although Jordan Hall about a year ago had converted to Christianity.
Interesting.
Which is very interesting. I am still waiting. I have not listened to. He did do a podcast with Jim Rutt talking about his conversion. I feel bad that I'm a little bit skeptical because we have a lot of recent converts, like Russell Brand, who think that, Christianity or Candace Owens, who think Christianity is all about Christ consciousness or baptizing people in their whitey tighties. And I don't know.
There's some concerns. There's, I would say that's a whole nother show, but
a whole nother show.
Yeah,
but I know what Christ consciousness means. I've read enough Blavatsky to know that this is not what is, this is not about Christianity.
It's not scripturally sound doctrine. Whenever you hear the word consciousness in pertaining to Christianity, you have to sit up in your chair. It's usually they're usually trying Gnostics or something trying to infiltrate.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of I reference like the little G Gnosticism, this kind of umbrella term that incorporates a lot of these other occult movements, the Hermeticists and the alchemists and the Theosophists, all of these various sects, but it's not necessarily directly attributing to the first century capital G Gnostics, who were considered the heretics of Christianity. But I think that there are these themes that are pervasive in all of them. And, one of them is that they can become gods or that God is within them. And this seems to be a current theme within all of them. And also just this idea that we came from, in the Theosophy language, they say source, right? That we came from this Mother Earth, this source, they call it, and that the purpose of the human experience is to return to that source. And of course, you reincarnate until your soul is spiritually evolved, you've consciously evolved enough. And if you don't make it around this time, it's okay. You just get subsumed, and the ascended masters will guide you. But the early ancients would have called it the undifferentiated all, right? That it's and somehow the one is better than the many. And I think it's just these recurring themes. I'm not saying there are never nuanced differences, but for the most part, I'm seeing a shared worldview, and it is directly antithetical to the monastic, Abrahamic worldview. And they say that themselves. I'm not putting words in their mouths or making up, interpretations of their own words. That's what they say. So
it's interesting too, because you also this idea of it a game. So there's almost this gamification game to get to game B, which I've seen in these other. It's actually an Intel thing.
Yes,
and it reminds me, JFK movie when Joe Pesci games. It's all about games, man. He's like playing David Ferry, and it really is kind of so like this game player theme also within these secret societies and things like that. Should be unnerving when they're using it in the context of this game B. So anybody who's like paying attention,
it's very much, I would agree with that. And so they tend to use in these game theory scenarios, they tend to use quadrants. So on one of the pages on the game B, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but they have the 4 quadrants actually. I think if you
see if I can find it.
Okay, I think if you go to the main page. On the browser on the left.
Different. Okay.
Yeah. So on the left, there you go. The main page, right? So if you go to that, and then you click on where it says, it says an introduction. No, I think it says C game B.
C game.
Oh, there it is. That's that. Okay. So this one. So on this one, you see they broke it into the quadrants, right?
Right.
And I think this is so fascinating because there's of course, Kenneth Wilbur, who's involved in Game B. He's one of the Game B thought leaders, if you will. And he has his theory of integralism, and he uses the 4 quadrants also. And then most of the futurists, which some of them are members of this, right? So there is Zach Stein, who, there's a list of the people. And we can go through that list too. Lots of very interesting characters are there. So the people.
There's Eric Weinstein.
Mhm.
Yep.
And the futurists, so like Zach Stein, who is 1/3 of David Temple. Remember, I've talked to you about the cosmoerotic humanists, and they did this. You can find it. The document can be found at the officeforthefuture.com. And this is the first principles and first values of evolving perennialism, a manifesto on cosmoerotic humanism. That's the front page. That's the title. Wow. A very long title. So evolving perennialism, right? This is right out of Blavatsky Theosophy, right? But the David Temple is the code name that they've used. I don't know why, because the authors are all listed. So it's Zach Stein, who is one of these Game B thought leaders. Zach Stein, just as of last year, as of 2024, was inducted into the Club of Rome.
Wow. See, that's what's really scary. Who else is involved in other of these bigger networks that they're not disclosing, whether it is the UN or whatever?
Like, well, Nora Basin is one of the people as well. She was behind the game. She was involved. She is a filmmaker. She was involved in the Game B film. And of course, her father's Gregory Bateson. And
Margaret Mead, right? They're together, right?
Yeah. The daughter of Margaret Mead.
That's the Macy conferences, yeah.
Exactly. And she is also a member of the Club of Rome. She was less surprising than Zach Stein. But Zach Stein, Mark Gaffney, who's doing his Eros Mystery Schools, and then, with Aubrey Marcus, they're cross-promoting there.
Aubrey Marcus is around too, right? So I think he's been on Rogan too, right?
A lot of these people have been on Rogan. Rogan has platformed a lot of these people. When people tell me how much they love Rogan, and Rogan is such a champion for freedom, I'm very curious because, he's platformed a lot of these people who otherwise would not be known. Now, I guess you could look at that, a couple of ways. Maybe he's bringing it to the forefront, and but I don't know.
But it is interesting because they're almost brought in, but they don't talk about this stuff. They're not overt, maybe. So it's also strange. They're brought in weird contexts. Well, like I think Aubrey Marcus, part of his shtick is like he's into nootropics or something like that. Like
yes,
vitamins.
And that's okay. Daniel Schmachtenberger. Tristan Harris, who's also both of them been on Rogan. And then who is the other one? I believe Jordan Hall, but they're all involved in this company called Neurohacker, which is now rebranded to be called Qualia Life. And it's a very interesting term that they've chosen because Qualia is like this philosophical essence of something, is kind of the meaning of it. But they're involved also in this Consilience project, which just the name Consilience is, like the convergence of everything. Here we go, the noosphere again. Right. But the Consilience project, I first came across it when I was doing my research on the natural asset companies, which are back. They're totally trying to resurrect that. And I recognized it in this research because their logo is so distinctive. And I'm very visual. Like I kind of have a memory where I see the pictures in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to find my notes on that because I remember. And it's the same company. And they do have ties to a lot of the major NGOs and the UN and whatnot. But yeah, so the other, we can go through some of these names. But yeah, so I think we have Tyson Yunkaporta, Tristan Harris.
This is like such a mind expander because these Weinsteins are very much connected into this Game B and all this kind of new thought and all this new age stuff, and they never come across it, dude. Like I got bad vibes from them, and now it's even worse after doing the show with you. It's like, oh my god! And Rogan's platformed some questionable people. Like, I mean,
well, I feel like Rogan is to the new iteration of the new age. But more of the technologically inclined new age people. Yeah. It's the technocrats really. He is to them what Oprah was to New Thought. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, look at all of them. He's had them all on. Andreessen,
I know.
Musk multiple times.
Yep.
The other guy for Teal. Teal acting strange the whole time and never really, like, he's a Bilderberger. Like, these
I know.
people are the enemy of Joe Rogan's audience. Like, what are you talking about? This is a total elitist. Also, for weird friendships too. Teal has very strange friendships, but
oh yeah,
and doing strange things. Overlaps with this, right? Like his stuff
very much overlaps with this. Yeah, well, of course, I think through the network state concepts, there's a right on the network state website, they're pending approval with Game B. But there's, of course, a network state was written by Srinivasan, Vishal Srinivasan, who was a CTO of Coinbase.
Wow.
So, there you have the Bitcoin huge connection. Yeah. And with Game B, there are a lot of technologies that Game B promotes, that they're advocating. And in some of them are like this thing called NoMap. NoMap is spelled NOOMAP. They've rebranded. They're now called the S7 Foundation, of course. And the S7 Foundation is very inspired by Barbara Marx Hubbard. This is all about synchronicity and synergy and, all those S's. But NoMap, it's literally inhabiting the noosphere. That's what they say, that it's literally about inhabiting the noosphere. So but even when you go back onto the About Game B and when you look at like their evolutionary backdrop page, even on the wiki, they reference this collective intelligence. They talk about Teilhard de Chardin and this vision of the noosphere. Now, I've had people push back on me and tell me that that's not what Chardin envisioned at all, and that really, the world we live in is already the noosphere that he envisioned. However, that I don't necessarily think that's true from how I've read him. However, even if that were true, these people are talking about the singularity. They're talking about the convergence of everything. They call it the global brain, and they reference it that way, global brain. So what is concerning to me about a lot of this is then when you start looking, they call it emerging technologies. And when this idea was, born, like when they birthed this concept of Game B, of course, as a spin-off of this Emancipation Party, of course, they had political aspirations, and then, more of, hey, well, that didn't work. Let's just do an overhaul on all of society. That's not a grandiose vision at all. But when they kind of moved into that space, they really started, it was just a vision, and they talked about the technologies. However, the technology really wasn't there. I mean, it may have been within, like military circles and classified documentation that I'm not aware of. But as far as I know, that technology really didn't exist. But now they call it emerging technologies, and those technologies are catching up. And, they're things like Web3, right, which is dependent on blockchain. There's a concept that they reference a lot, and there are several videos on this, what's called holochains. And this idea of holons, and it's kind of like this all-encompassing, but it would be layered on top of blockchain. And so they advocate it as being the DAO. This is a decentralized autonomous organization. So they always talk about how it's human-centered. And when you look at, like, I did a video on the fifth industrial revolution. I'm sure you've heard of Klaus Schwab's book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. They claim that the World Economic Forum coined the term Fourth Industrial Revolution, which, of course, Elon Musk has been very instrumental in fomenting with every single one of his companies. But there are a lot of the quote-unquote experts in this field claim we're already actually in the fifth industrial revolution, and they've actually outlined the sixth and seventh industrial revolution. Wow. They call it Society 6.0 or Industry 6.0. Industry 7.0, but it's sixth, seventh industrial revolution. And in this, the buzzword they keep using is how it's human-led, it's autonomous. And when they talk about this, they're talking about autonomous agents on the internet. Now, of course, it's human-led because we're not at the point of sentient beings where, these sentient technology, rather, we have sentient humans, but not sentient technologies. And so of course, they're still programmed by humans. And they actually, and with a lot of these emerging technologies, and even in these Game B dialogues, dialogues is a big word that they always use. And, of course, the Esalen circles, the Macy circles, they always use this term.
This Greek stuff, dialogue, stoa, right? So that's a reference to Greek architecture.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly what this is about.
The stoa here, yeah. So
mm-hmm.
Interesting, yeah.
So they talk about these dialogues, and even in that those conversations, they're always talking about these emerging technologies and how it is going to be human-centered and it'll be decentralized. They have a term. So there's a page on here. It's the concepts page, and terms like DeFi, which is decentralized finance. This is the cryptocurrency. This is tokenization. So I know a lot of people think that this is the answer, but there is not. When you start looking at things like the NFTs, which they have for Game B, this is not replacing a fiat currency. It's just another fiat, because they're not talking about a limited coin. They're talking about, right? Even Trump's coin went from, I don't know the numbers, but there was a limited amount, and then suddenly there were billions.
Wow,
or multi-million. I don't remember the numbers, but it went from a smaller amount and suddenly there were more, which means they can just keep printing them, right? They can keep printing these coins, which is the idea. That is a fiat currency. It's not backed by
right. If it's not backed by anything, if you can just make up
anything,
immortal
and it's
numbers,
unlimited.
yeah.
So they're talking about that. Now, the first concept that comes up on this page is B Corporation. And I did quite a bit. This was the live stream I did. I thought I would just hop on and it might be like a half an hour or maybe an hour. I ended up being 2 hours and 40 minutes on this topic. But B corporations are actually linked to the UN. Wow. This is a new iteration of ESGs. They don't call it ESGs. They call it like social and I think they might have. Maybe it's just SG.
Was that the episode you did, A Game, B Economy? Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah, that's
Game B Economy.
That's the B Economy. Wow.
So they really model out this game. So this B corporation, and now to be fair, people like Jim Rutt have said that it's not a direct Game B, concept, but that it's affiliated. It would be a part of Game B, but it's not all of it. But these corporations are already well underway. I think there's something like 6,000 of them, and very big names like Ben and Jerry's and Patagonia. This is not like a fringe thing that a couple of people are doing. But in this like tokenization that they're talking about things like, climate, like biodiversity credits and, carbon net zero initiatives. And it's all about, their terminology is the gift economy. So Game B talks about gift economy, but it's the same kind of circular economy, a degrowth world. It's a post-capitalist world.
But it's the gamification is strange. And the fact that it's called a game. Do you want to play a game? Something about it's unnerving. It's not serious. It's not like a detached kind of like, sterile kind of, this is the political system of the different things. It's like, this is it. And it also has a weird, maybe I'm super paranoid, which I am, but maybe it's like a fight club. Like this guy, Jordan Hall, says, Game B is notoriously difficult to think and talk about for the very good reason that if you were using the conceptual structures that came out of Game A to do so, you may very well be poisoning the well. So it's like, you're not part of not only is Game A and Game B, but I'm part of Game B and you're still part of Game A. So it's almost like creating a different, cattle pen or something where we're in the advanced one and you're not.
That's exactly right. And this comes straight out of this same kind of evolve or die cult, right? It's the same mindset.
It's just different terminology. It's the same concepts, different. Wow.
Well, and they keep talking about how they've renamed things. So Jordan Hall actually did it's on Medium. You can find it, a whole article. I might be able to pull that up and find it to give you the exact words.
I would love to. We'll have to do a part 2 because unfortunately I got to run.
Okay.
But, I'm so glad I talked to you because this really set the gears of my mind spinning. Like, it's really incredible when you see this, the overlap with some of this cult and new age behavior with this, really scary. People should be very concerned. And those two characters, Eric and Brett Weinstein, wow. I mean, it's getting worse. Like, this is not safe. And they're going to bring people into a new cattle pen, just like I said. This one may be closer to the abattoir than the game A, so-called, which is never good, especially if there's not any control things. Like, they're not talking about a legal system or how to keep criminals out of it, or protection or defense of individual rights. It's not there. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I'm missing it.
I haven't seen it yet either. I don't know if they haven't been working on it. There's a lot of brainstorming going on, a lot of think tank. But next time I'll actually give you the exact verbiage. But just but Jordan Hall does say that the term sovereignty is not what you think it is, and he redefines it.
Right. So then you see this other definition you see in kind of cult behavior or weird political stuff behavior, where they have different definitions for simple words and different words.
Yep.
Guys, go check out Courtenay Turner's podcast. I'll put a link to the podcast. You can listen to her talk about these topics or discussing Game B in detail. In her other episodes, Game A, B, Economy. I listened to Want to Play a Game. That was kind of the play on the title of this episode, which I called it. And then you can also listen to her about the Fifth Industrial Revolution. And there's the intellectual dark web and influence operation. My answer is yes. And these guys are the intellectual dark web too, which
Jordan Peterson's on that list of people too.
Right. And it makes me think of, there's this picture of Rogan. They're all having dinner together. It's Peterson, Weinstein, Sam Harris, who's also my favorite kind of.
He started the whole sense making, which is another one of their terms. He's
one of my favorite hard science polemicists, where he always couches things in hard science. He went to the same school that Jolly West, by the way. It's basically
who?
Jolly and West, who was the scientist at UCLA. It's changed a couple names, but it's basically the same organization that Sam Harris went through. But anyway, there's a picture of all these guys together, and at one point, it's such a and it's Shapiro too. And at first glance, I'm like, oh, look at these buddies. They're all having dinner together. They're all chums.
Yeah, I've seen that picture.
Yeah, and it's to me, it was benign. And now that I look at it, I'm like, this is a huge influence operation on Joe Rogan. Like, this is very sinister. Like, I'm getting scared for some of the people in the alternate media. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding. They're surrounding themselves with some very interesting characters whose other connections haven't been flushed out as well. So we can leave that.
And when you were talking about Thiel, Eric Weinstein has direct ties. He managed his firm.
Manages VC firm, Thiel to Vance, to Trump, to all these guys. Like, even the rollout in the last 4 days has been really extraordinary.
Oh, yeah.
Courtenay Turner podcast, where can they find? So they can find your other episodes and anything. And they can, for the favor of getting all this information, which I haven't heard anybody do as great a job as you've done, they can buy you a coffee too, right? So
thank you.
Go buy Courtenay Turner a coffee. I'll put your buy a coffee link in there too, so people can do that.
Thank you.
And thank
you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Great to talk with you, and we'll do another show soon. Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Stay there. All right, stay there.